Yeah, sure. I'm very glad that I didn't happen to wear the same sweater that I'm wearing in my LinkedIn profile photo. That could have very easily have happened because I have some favorite sweaters. But okay, so like I mentioned, I head up the content team at Bubble, which has obviously been an extremely dynamic past 12 months for us, 12 months plus as the no code and AI app development space has just exploded and changed extremely rapidly. And so Roofage here on the PMM side is, takes lead on making sure that we know what kind of features our competitors are building and how well those features work. But I was sort of tasked with the idea of tracking messaging and how our competitors are talking about themselves and how they're talking about our industry. And so, as I went through the advanced certification with AirOps, I took that opportunity to submit a workflow that also like solved that business problem for me live. So I'm just gonna dive in and then I'm gonna like show it live. So if you aren't familiar with AirOps, don't worry, I'll get there. So basically the like situation that was facing us is like I'm sure that everybody here is like super familiar with this, but the category that Bubble is in the AI app development space is just like being rewritten every single day. Vibe coding came in, 15 months ago or whatever, and went mainstream, which was like actually good for us, right? Because Bubble's been around for a long time, and we used to have to like tell people the good news that they could build an app themselves. Now everybody knows that they can build an app themselves, which is half the battle. But the problem is that everybody sounds exactly the same. Everybody's like, build an app in minutes with AI. And like I could say that, and it could be any of like 12 different companies that might be talking about themselves. So everybody's trying to figure out how to stand out and how to not sound like everyone else. Um, and our competitors are moving really fast. They have been infused with insane amounts of cash flow, and they are changing how they talk about themselves in the industry, like sometimes overnight. And then they're spending a lot of money to get that messaging out there. And it was a manual process for us to keep track of that. We have some Slack channels where people are like, "Oh, I saw that this company said this and this company said that." But we weren't necessarily being alerted when these messaging changes took place. So now I'm just going to show you what I built. So before I like dive into it, just like to sort of set the stage, if you aren't familiar with AirOps, it's essentially a platform that lets you daisy chain automation steps and different AI models and like LLM steps together into really massive, really smart workflows, and then run those workflows at scale, which is a lot of fun. Some of the classic use cases are content refresh, content creation, things like that. But I wanted to find a more fun way to use it. So this is what the grid looks like. So in AirOps, you can build a workflow and then you can have the output or you can run it from a grid. These are 10 competitors that we identified that we wanted to start listening to. Thanks to Rufage for developing this list that I then borrowed from him. And so what this workflow does is I'm going to jump into this now so that you can see it. I'm not going to go through every single step because, frankly, I built this with a lot of help from their AI Copilot, which is actually really good. But basically, the way that it works is it looks in our knowledge base for our brand guidelines, and then it goes and it searches for the last time it ran this. When what it does is going to write a snapshot of these competitors and save it in our knowledge base as well. Obviously, the first time we ran this, it wasn't searching for old snapshots. It just created new snapshots, but now it has previous snapshots of these competitors. So it looks at our brand guidelines and messaging. It looks at the previous snapshots that it took, and then it goes out and it goes and it scrapes these all 10 of these competitors' websites and it iterates through all of them, their homepage as well as any pages that are linked in their main nav and any new blog posts that they put out, and then like, iterates inside the iterator so that it's like looking sort of at this competitor and all their pages and the other competitors and all their pages. And then it assigns a score to, sorry, I should say it then compares these new snapshots to the old snapshots that are hosted in our knowledge base. And then it assigns a score to if there has been a significant shift in the way that this competitor is talking about themselves or the industry. And that's on a scale from 1 to 10. zero to 10, 0 to 3 being not much of a change, 4 to 7 being sort of like a relative change, and then obviously like anything above that being a significant change. And then if it has above 3, so anything that's mid or significant change, it will then send us a Slack message in our channel for competitive watching and sends a summary of what those shifts were and what it means compared to our positioning, and then puts together an entire report. So if I go back to the grid, that's this workflow, and this is scheduled to run every single Monday. So every single Monday, it goes through that, and then it sort of outputs so I can see the results in the grid. And so this week, obviously, we didn't get any Slack messages because nobody had a shift score of a 4 or greater. We only had a couple of 3s. So in that case, I might like stop in here throughout the week when I think about it and see, oh, well, obviously there was nothing major, but like, was there anything minor? And I can then open this up and read through what were the key changes that made it a 3 instead of a 0. How does that impact us and the way that we talk about ourselves? And then down here, I can see an actual snapshot of their homepage title tag and a summary of like the messaging that they're actually putting it out there, not just like a summary of how that compares to ours. And then this section up here is what gets sent in the Slack channel. I am, as a next step, I think going to try to improve the formatting of this so it's like a little bit less of a wall of text, but it has worked so far. And then what's I think even more fun is it then we have another AI step inside that workflow that says whether we should consider responding or not. We might consider responding if the shift score is relatively high, or we might consider responding if there's just a lot of overlap in our positioning and we feel like we need to differentiate ourselves. And if we so then choose to respond, I can run this separate workflow, which essentially generates LinkedIn captions for our CEO that would go out and directly address this shift in the market or this like positioning step that we noticed. And obviously, I can like edit these before I send and whatnot. And I think I do still have some voice and tone work to do on these generated LinkedIn captions. They sound very AI right now, but I'm excited to, see. I know we are working with our CEO to like do more sort of this thought leadership in the market. Um, and yeah, that is the workflow. So if I go back to my slides, yeah, so what's working? I think the weekly Slack, we've only just started with the weekly Slack updates, but we've gotten a couple so far, and it's definitely caught things that nobody saw on their own. And I think that the having a shift score is also like a really nice way to understand how like significant something is and help us decide if it's worth our time to go in and respond. We're also using AirOps for content refresh and creating new content for the purposes of SEO. I know we're going to talk about content creation, so I don't want to go into that too much, but like if anybody wants to hear about it, I'm happy to talk through it. And then some things that we're still thinking through, right? Like how do we is this sensitive enough, right? Like do we want to get a little bit more sensitive to those 2s and 3s? Is an executive thought leadership uh, like LinkedIn post going to be the best way to respond? And then, I think also like it's worth thinking about whether weekly is enough or too often, et cetera, et cetera. But that was all I had. So I would love to hear like any questions, but also like any thoughts you have for like even making this better or what you might do. Yeah, go ahead. I see you, Matt.
First off, this is amazing.
Thanks.
Like, this is awesome. And you did a demo. So cool. I've actually done some similar stuff with like technical documentation to do like analysis across pages. I had not thought of doing it for like competitive analysis. So just really cool to see like LLMs used for something that would otherwise take tons of time. Two quick questions. One is like, how much does this cost? Because it seems like you're mostly running it on the homepage, or are you actually running across the entire website?
It's scraping the homepage, all the pages linked in the main nav, and like I think the last week's new blog posts.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. So you're doing like sort of surface level, but not like super deep into the website, because that's where like the costs tend to like pile up.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of curious, maybe just a bigger question, like how do you balance like you're trying to set your own direction and vision with like also recognizing that competitors are doing stuff in the market and you don't want to just like sort of like try to copy them feature for feature. So how do you think about balancing that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and obviously we were figuring it out as we go. But we are like really cognizant of trying to make sure that we do not sound like everybody else, the way that everybody else sounds like everybody else. But I do think that it's still really important for us to make sure that we're paying attention, especially because some of these really noisy competitors like Lovable sometimes even like can dictate the verbiage that the market is using, right? Like we have like always been a no-code visual editor, and when Lovable started calling their like font tweaks visual edits, we were grateful because now people like understand that term a little bit better, right? And so um, we want to make sure that we're in tune with that so that we can make sure that we are keeping up with people's mental models so we can tap into the mental models that consumers have and make sure we're using the verbiage that they will understand quickly. But also part of this is like if they are saying it this way, maybe that's a reason for us to say it the opposite way. And not necessarily try to match them, but instead trying to like use that as data for us to sound different. So something that we're figuring out every single day, but yeah, I don't know that I have all the answers there.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a tough question. That was a good answer, Didi. By the way, Matt did not really introduce himself properly. At some point, he was orchestrating one of the largest, most content engines for developers when he was leading that at Twilio, then Assembly and DigitalOcean. So you two should connect if you haven't yet. Anita, one more
Oh,
question before we go to Nico.
thank you, Francois. So, Anita Pandey, I head up marketing at Clockwork.io. So, it's an AI infrastructure company. Thank you so much for this help. I'm trying to do something similar with Clay. And uh, I was just wondering, because it's a very similar workflow, but I'm struggling a little bit with what channels to track on competitors. So, for instance, and so I'm just wondering how you made that decision. So, I'm tracking LinkedIn, but I'm also tracking things like Reddit and GitHub to see if there's forks of solutions, et cetera. So, I just wanted to hear from you on how you did that because sometimes there's too much intent, not enough signal. And so, how do you kind of separate the noise from the signal there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I have been kind of playing in the back of my mind with if I want to incorporate something like Twitter or LinkedIn into the listening step and like the iterator step of this, because um, like I'm cognizant that like sometimes things happen there first. But I think in the spirit of trying to not be too reactive in the market, once something has made it to their website, like I feel like for me that like shows that they're like, okay, we're gonna go forward with this messaging. So I think for now that's working for us, but I have not ruled out like the possibility of like listening in different places. One of the cool things about AirOps is that they have they also so they don't just have like the workflow creation, they also have an AI search analytics platform, which is really nice because you can then port opportunities directly into your content creation grid or what have you. But they actually have an entire section of their analytics on Reddit. So you can find conversations that are like opportunities for you to um, take advantage of and like go in and join. We're also in the middle of doing like an audit on the Reddit ecosystem, especially I think because like Bubble users are like also like they're on Reddit. And so I have not quite gotten to the point where we're ready to really like start going forward and charging into the Reddit sphere quite yet, but we're getting ready to. So I've kind of been pausing on the Reddit question, but I also plan to like use that tool that AirOps has in terms of opportunities for Reddit there. So that might have been, I'm not sure I quite answered your question, but